250,000 public servants in the United Kingdom could be replaced by robots in the next 15 years, according to a new report from the British think tank Reform. Meanwhile, the United Nations recently said 2/3 of the jobs in the developing world could also be replaced by machines. The rapid rise of artificial intelligence and automation also puts millions of Canadian jobs at risk. Sunil Johal is Director of Policy at the Mowat Centre at the University of Toronto. How big is this risk for Canada and Canadian jobs?
So if we look at the Canadian numbers and these projections of about 42% of Canadian jobs being at high risk of automation over the next 10 to 20 years, that is the equivalent of about 7.5 million Canadian jobs that could be eliminated as a result of automation and artificial intelligence. The thing we need to keep in mind, however, there is many of those jobs would likely be replaced by new uses for labor, new jobs emerging that are complementary to these types of technology. But the challenge is going to be, how do we adapt to this rapidly churning labor market where many people are being thrown out of jobs that they've had for a number of years and thrown into an uncertain future.
What kind of jobs disappear? Because there's another level of robotic and artificial intelligence capability.
That's the thing. So we're used to, when we talk about automation, thinking about jobs in manufacturing plants or jobs on a farm field, for example. Now we're talking about investment bankers, lawyers, doctors, accountants, insurance brokers. We're talking about very white-collar professions, which historically we never would have thought would have been at risk from automation. But the computing power and analytics are at a point now where computers can actually outthink humans in many of those sectors, and they can actually do it more quickly, more efficiently. They never get sick. Their hands are never tremoring if they're stitching up a patient. So I think in a lot of ways, this, for many people, it's a bit of a game changer in terms of the encroachment of machines into areas that we never would have thought they would have been able to replace humans in the past.
Can you give us a taste of what it would look like? What kind of jobs go, say, in a law office or a doctor's office?
Sure. So in a legal office, I mean, I was an articling student many decades, or a few years ago. I'm not that old, many years ago. And one of the big tasks we had, and a lot of the junior lawyers, was legal research. So a senior lawyer would come to us and say, find the case that will help us as we move forward with litigation and as looking at this particular point of law. So what we would do is we had computer technology and we'd look up things on databases, but a lot of our time was reading cases, deciding what was relevant, deciding what wasn't relevant. Now a computer, with these advances over the last 15 years in artificial intelligence, can do the exact same thing in seconds and spit out a memo that's probably just about as good as the one I would have been able to produce 15 years ago, but spending 10 or 15 hours of my time. And it can do it in seconds. And in a medical scenario, we're looking at IBM's Watson has been diagnosing cancer patients and doing it at the same level as cancer experts, and in many cases actually finding new treatment options that we hadn't seen before. So it's really across the board. It's diagnosis, it's thinking, it's analytical capability.
So your law case still goes to your lawyer, your medical case still goes to your doctor, but it's all that work behind that can be done by robots.
Exactly, and so instead of maybe having 50 or 60 junior lawyers, I need 20 or 30 junior lawyers, and they're harnessing that technology and making their own work more efficient. I mean, Goldman Sachs recently spoke publicly about the fact that in 2000 they had 600 equity traders on their US desk. They have 2 now, and they have 200 software engineers supporting those workers. So I mean, these are people who are making millions of dollars a year being replaced by robotics analytics.
I'm sure people are wondering right now, whose job is safe?
I think if we look broadly, the types of jobs that are safe are the types of jobs that don't have any type of routine function associated with them. So if your job changes and is dynamic and doesn't look the same from minute to minute or even hour to hour, that's the type of job that is likely not going to be replaced by machines anytime soon, because machines just aren't quite at that level of kind of adaptive, creative, nimble thinking quite yet. And the other space is jobs that require a great deal of dexterity in terms of carrying things and moving things around, because the robots just aren't at that point yet where they can successfully carry a plate of food, for example, in a busy restaurant and put it down on someone's plate without tripping over a coat rack.
I heard you say not yet, but are we as a country ready for this? Millions of jobs, big chunk of the workforce.
I would argue we're absolutely not ready for this. Even if technological progress, I could hit pause and stop it right now. Many of the programs we have in place to support workers, to support Canadians generally, aren't adequate in today's day and age. Something like employment insurance only covers less than 40% of Canadians who are unemployed currently. Income inequality is a huge issue where more and more income gains are accruing to the wealthiest 1 or 10% of the population. The challenge is technology is just going to accelerate things like income inequality, precarious work going forward. So if things aren't working well right now, they're going to be much more dire in the future. So we really need to take a step back and think about what kind of social supports do we need to put in place so they have job training, they have access to adequate medical benefits, health benefits, and things like that.
You said off the top that new jobs spring up, as always happens when something disruptive invades an economy. What do those jobs look like, and how long is the lag time before they spring up?
I think what we're likely to see is jobs that are complementary to technology. So if we have autonomous vehicles on the road, for example, and they're driving school kids back and forth to school every day, most parents would probably feel comfortable if there's still an adult human on board that bus in case something goes wrong and to make sure all the kids are getting on the bus effectively. So it's a complement, it's not necessarily a replacement, but is that person being paid at the same level? Maybe it's a lower paying job, maybe it's a more precarious job. And the lag time, I think that's an open question. We don't really know. Most of the reports and studies that have looked into this think that we're looking at a decade to 2 decades out before the full effects of this technological revolution are fully felt. But the challenge is we're already seeing it right now, so we need to take action right now on these issues.
All right, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Sunil is Policy Director at the University of Toronto's Mowat Centre.